at St Joseph's Hospital, and I've been a dietitian for 19 years. And what we do, we work in a multidisciplinary team, and I think that is an asset and a privilege to be working in. Today I'll talk about the possible MND symptoms and how they will impact your nutrition overall, and give you some tips about eating and drinking so that you can take home and use. Okay, there might be a lot of information that I will give you, but please keep an open mind. And if you do have any questions, just ask. Okay? So what a dietitian does in M&D, we're not here to criticise what you're eating and drinking. We're actually here to have a look at what your medical history is, your diagnosis of M&D, and try and give you some ideas on what is the best way to eat and drink to help you through this difficult time. So we'll start off with this. Okay. So it's good to understand some of the symptoms and how they can impact how you're eating and drinking and the type of foods that you can or cannot eat. And these symptoms may occur in some people with MND. It may not occur, and it can occur in various degrees of them. So say, for example, weight loss is actually well known, and it's normal to occur in MND, but there are ways to try and preserve that weight loss, to try and maintain your muscle and fat stores as much as possible. I guess what we tend to look at with the weight loss, it can, if it happens too quickly, it can contribute to other problems as well, like early onset of malnutrition and fatigue and loss of appetite. So we'll have a look at that in a little bit. Constipation. If constipation is a symptom or you're experiencing it, there are ways to try and improve that. But constipation can affect your satiety levels, can cause discomfort and bloating. I mean, it's not a pleasant feeling, and it can impact how much you eat. So if you're feeling full quite early, you don't feel like eating sometimes. So we do need to try and work with our team to help you, whether you need to take medication or adjust your diet to help alleviate that constipation. Swallowing is difficult at times in some people, and with swallowing, the muscles in the throat can become weaker, which is what Claire and Dr. Brennan had explained earlier. And with that, that also contributes to how much you're eating. If you're not swallowing well enough, your intake may be reduced, and that's why it's important to actually have a look at what you're eating and having your dietitian have a look at that for you. Some other symptoms that can affect your eating and drinking are things like your hand function. If that's impacted, you know, we take for granted using a knife and fork or using a spoon to scoop up the food and bringing it towards your mouth so that you're eating and enjoying your food. At times, that can be quite stressful if you're losing that hand function, and it can actually cause fatigue as well, taking a little bit longer to eat and drink, and sometimes it can contribute to you not enjoying the pleasant atmosphere of eating and drinking with your loved ones. Some of the symptoms, Dr. Brennan talked about psychology, and anxiety and depression can be seen in people with MND, and that can also contribute to loss of appetite as well, which then inhibits, you know, what you should or shouldn't be eating. And again, fatigue, which is quite common. Okay, so what I want you to take from this slide is that understand where you're at with any of these symptoms. You may or may not have them, but if you do experience any of these or they have started to change, then you need to let your health professional know, because we can come in and give you some advice. Okay? So in regards to nutrition and MND, there's not a lot out there. And this is the downfall. I guess what we do know is that MND is hypermetabolic. That means it uses and consumes a lot of energy, and that's what contributes to that weight loss. The requirements of people living with MND becomes a lot more because of this, and that's why we need to focus on having a lot more foods that are higher in energy and protein, which I'll touch on a little bit later. Okay, there are some information out there that does say that weight status at diagnosis is a predictor for survival time. We do know that high energy, high protein foods is the key to try and maintain your weight or gain a little bit of weight, and that oral intake or eating through the mouth can be well supported by a feeding tube, which I'll talk a little bit about today. Okay. We don't know of any specific vitamins or minerals that can help alleviate with MND either, so it's an unknown area. So hopefully in the future we'll get to know more information. All right. Now, I will look at each of the food groups just to give you some knowledge to take home, and I can explain why they are important. So protein foods, they're things like what's up on the slide, so your fish, your meats, your eggs, chicken, things like nuts, legumes, lentils, tofu, cheeses, dairy products, you know, there's some found in avocado as well as milk. So protein's actually the building blocks for your muscles. It repairs cells, and it helps contribute to maintaining your muscle mass. So we do recommend having about 1 to 2 serves of protein at each meal, and that will help you maintain or preserve what you can through your diet. M&D is slightly a way of where weight loss will occur, and muscle mass tends to be the first thing you start losing, but preserving what we can through what we eat is quite important. Okay. All right. Other food groups, things like fats and oils, they are high in calorie, they're quite dense and contributes well as an energy source, and it helps with cognitive function as well. So we do encourage you to use a lot of fats and oils and added creams and butters to your food. It's quite the opposite, isn't it, to what we usually hear out there, isn't it? But this is what we do recommend. And it also helps, added fats helps to absorb a lot of vitamins, like your vitamins A, D, E and K are quite important. So what I do recommend is adding things like olive oil in cooking and to your salads. If you are making a soup, adding some cream or sour cream to that. If you're making a sandwich, adding on some butter, avocado. That's just to, making sure that every mouthful does count, okay? Another area is carbohydrate foods, and unfortunately has a bad rap in the media, and it's actually very, very important. Carbohydrate foods are things like breads and cereals, your pasta, your potatoes. Fruit also contains carbohydrate, and carbohydrate provides your body with energy. It actually supports your muscles to function. Your muscles need a fuel source, similar to what petrol does in a car. If you don't provide your car with petrol, it's not going to run, is it? So your body also needs that carbohydrate. It's a fuel for your brain to work, and it actually helps with your breathing. So you do need the carbohydrate to be included at each meal. Now, if you don't provide your body with carbohydrates, your body will look for it elsewhere, and it will start to use your muscles as an energy source. So that's why it's important to make sure you eat enough carbohydrate. If you are a diabetic, it's also important just to make sure the portion of your carbohydrates still come into play, okay? But your dietitian is the best person to give you that advice and to, organise what you should or shouldn't be eating and make a few changes if needed. So hydration, we've mentioned already, have I gone too far? I have, I'm sorry. I've pressed the button twice. So variety of fruit and vegetables, I want you to think rainbow colours. That will give you the most nutrition. Fruit and vegetables contain a lot of fibre. That will help with constipation. And particularly if you eat things with the skin on, you know, like a kiwi fruit. Eat it with the skin on, if you like to try it. Ooh. Back. I think I keep touching the keyboard. That's actually not good. I better step back. So having things with the skin on as much as possible is actually quite good in terms of fibre. But again, from carbohydrate foods, which was on the previous slide, does provide you with a good source of fibre if you're having whole grain or, you know, wholemeal breads and cereals. The fruit and vegetables do provide you with a variety of minerals and vitamins. And if you do eat a rainbow of colours, you're bound to get, you know, most of your nutrition from that. So, for example, green leafy vegetables contain a lot of folate. Your orange and yellow citrus fruits and vegetables do contain a lot of vitamin A, and kiwi fruits and tomatoes will give you some vitamin C, and your red, purple type of fruit and vegetables are full of antioxidants. Okay, so that's why try and keep a variety going. Fruit and vegetables are lower in energy, and that's why we look at adding a lot more fats and oils to things just to flavour it up and making sure that every mouthful does count. So again, to your vegetables, adding oils and butter and things like that, just to flavour it. And if you want with your fruit, you can add a bit of cream to it or custard to make it more enjoyable as well. Okay. Right. So we're going to look at water. Water is actually quite good for you. Some people don't like water, so it's still okay to have other types of drinks, whether they're hot or cold. But as long as you're getting yourself really well hydrated, it does help a lot with bowel management. The impact, if you're not having enough water, you will become dehydrated, which can lead to other issues, can cause some confusion, can cause infections like urinary tract infections if you're not having enough fluid, can cause constipation and poor skin tone. So that's why it's important to stay well hydrated. Okay, so some simple tips. I guess small frequent meals. If you're finding it hard to eat your 3 main meals, small frequent meals throughout the day, you know, having some mid-meals, morning tea, afternoon tea and supper is what's recommended. Making sure that every mouthful does count, and try and include some protein foods with your main meals, quite important there. If you're getting quite tired around mealtime, some people I find get quite tired in the evening, so focusing more of your intake earlier on in the day can actually help maintain your energy requirements and eating well. And making sure your pantry is full of easy to grab foods. Sometimes you can't be bothered cooking, or if you're a carer, it does get tiresome. So having things like frozen meals in the freezer, ready to grab snacks or desserts from the fridge, they're easy to go and have around. Okay, and enjoy your favourite foods. I think that's very, very important. Okay. However, sometimes what we eat and drink naturally through, you know, everyday foods, may not be enough to meet our requirements, and you'll find that sometimes we may need a little bit of help, and that is okay. We're lucky enough in this day and age to be able to have different products available that can help boost our intake of food or help us have foods that's easier to swallow, and I'll go through that now. Okay, some of you may be familiar with this. These are just some of the nutritional products that we have around. Not all of them are out there, and there's many, many companies that do make them. These are concentrated nutritional supplements, so they might be higher in energy or protein or fats, and most of them, majority of them would be nutritionally complete, but your dietitian's the best person to actually give you the right information about which one's best for you. I guess, for example, if we look at this one here, this one's a powder, and Sustagen comes in different flavours. There's like vanilla, chocolate, and sometimes there's this neutral, which it's one of my favourite. You can add to any sweet or savoury food just to boost that mouthful that you're having with calories and some protein. You can add it to soups, you can add it to custards, casseroles, stews, mashed potato, anything you like. There are some nutritional drinks that we have. We've got also things that you can have as a mid-meal drink. They're quite concentrated, or you can have it as part of your meal at the end. So if you don't feel like eating the rest of your meal, you can easily sip on these concentrated nutritional supplements. And some of them come up as a dessert, and it's a treat packaged for you, delivered to your door too. So yeah, easily done. Okay, but again, the dietitian's the best one to recommend which is best for you. Now, there are some other nutritional supplements that are changed into a thickness that's best easily swallowed. So the speech pathologist may recommend you to have a fluid that is, slightly thicker than what water is, and there are different degrees of this thickness, and you can obtain those thickened products, from a lot of the companies that make them, like Flavor Creations or Nestle, and there are also nutritional products in these different levels of thickness, and both the speech pathologist and the dietitian can work together with that. Now, this is the part of M&D many people don't like to talk about, and I've had a few people burst into tears in clinic when I have raised this topic. It's quite emotional, it's quite daunting, but as a health professional, it's my duty to let you know what's involved with feeding tubes, and it does provide you with an option for quality of life later on. So if it's taking longer for you to eat your meal, if you're losing a drastic amount of weight, if you're having trouble swallowing, the feeding tube can come into play. And if eating and drinking is becoming quite a chore, a feeding tube can also help. And the best person to actually give you that advice or direct you with the right information would be your M&D specialist, consultants, your dietitian or speech pathologist. I've got a little bit of a picture up here. You'll find that feeding tubes, we sometimes call it enteral nutrition. It's just referring to the root and how it's inserted. And you'll come across some of these fancy names. They're just abbreviations. So with the percutaneous endoscopic gastrostomy tube, this one here, that one is the one here in the blue. That's just a fancy name to say that it's put through and it's stored into the stomach. There you go. The others are not too commonly used, and these ones are temporary, the NG, ND or NJ, so nasogastric tubes and so forth, refer to where it's placed and that it comes down through the nose. But these are quite temporary. Some specialists may use them to give you some nutrition or hydration just until the PEG tube's inserted, but they're only temporary, so they won't last that long. It's important to know that the decision around having a tube does involve a lot of planning and organisation with your M&D team. It does come at a lot of thought-provoking time with yourself and your family members to help you make that decision, whether you do want to go through the process. But just to let you know that once you have the tube, you don't really have to use it. You can choose when you want to use that tube, and it might not be there and then, it might be right at the end, but at least you have a tube there that can actually help you out if you need to improve your quality of life. And what that means is you might be okay, you're eating all right, but then there might be a time where you might need to add a little bit of nutrition through the tube just to help maintain your weight, that you don't lose further weight. You might need to help with hydration. Maybe the constipation has become too too invasive for you, there's too much pain, the medication needs a little bit more fluid and you're not drinking enough, we can actually put fluid through the tube. And then medications. If medications become too difficult to swallow, that can be organised with your local pharmacist to try and choose which medications can actually go through the PEG tube. You can use the tube for all of these reasons, part of these reasons, or just a little bit of each of them. Okay, but the decision is still yours. All right. So with feeding, nutritional feeding formulas or equipment, your dietitian is the best one to give you that advice as to which way to do it. They can help you with registering you with the companies that provide you with this service in terms of syringes or pump lines. There's a lot involved, and it might seem a little bit confusing, but I'm more than happy to answer a few questions at the end regarding this or around lunchtime. But what we do know is that early placement of a feeding tube allows for a smoother process and allows a better tolerance and better way of maintaining your weight. I'm just going to read this. This is a study that came out. It said significant weight loss at the onset of enteral feeding was associated with shorter survival. Investigators recommend enteral feeding for MND patients as early as possible at 5% weight loss from MND diagnosis. And the reason for that is that if your intake has reduced quite significantly and you do start to use a feeding tube, the volume of the nutritional formula may not be well tolerated, and you may see an increase in reflux. So starting that process of a transition to a feeding tube is what we would usually recommend. And again, as MND, the disease progresses, respiratory function can also come into play. And sometimes there's a fine line between introducing a feeding tube and whether you're able to go under anaesthetic to have the feeding tube inserted. So respiratory function can actually make that decision for you if it's progressed quite significantly. And sometimes in the public system, the waiting time to actually have a tube inserted can be quite lengthy. I know that when we liaise with Westmead Hospital, sometimes it can take up to 3 months by the time they process paperwork, and then there's a waiting list. It can be part of the time factor, which what Claire was talking about. Things do come into play about time. Okay. Right. So I guess to summarise and to say that this analogy or this little abbreviation, the word embrace, it's eat what you want, when you want, monitor for any changes of weight, of swallow, your appetite, and making sure that you let your health professional know if these changes do occur. Be surrounded by family and friends when you're eating and drinking. It's meant to be a joyous time, so enjoy it. Regularly use high energy and high protein food and drinks, that's what's recommended. And there are nutrition support options, so try and apply these options earlier on and have these discussions openly. Ask questions as much as you can. The dietitian, call on her or him for advice, and enjoy your food and drinks. I guess that's the most important information to take home today. So I think we're all ready for lunch. Unless anyone has any questions, please ask away.
Thank you, Amal.
That's all right.
Fantastic. I'll just bring the microphone, and if you could repeat the question.
Yeah,
Amal,
of course.
Much appreciated.
Exhaustion after eating, what happened there?
Yeah, so exhaustion after eating, I guess we need to try and time when you are eating. If it's happening at every meal, do you just eat part of that meal? Should your meal be fortified with extra protein powders or energy powders, which is one of the slides I've put up earlier, just to make sure that if you're eating, say, only half a cup or 1 cup of a meal, do you need to make sure that's quite energy dense? And that discussion of being fatigued is actually very important to have with your health professional, because it may even need to be along the lines of, do I need to have a PEG? Do I need to start considering that now?
And give me some advice on how to get those supplements like Ensure and
Yep.
things that at a good price.
Yeah, so they can be costly, and I guess if you're lucky enough to be linked up with a dietitian in a hospital system, they are able to register you with the home enteral registration system. So that enables you to receive those supplements at a adequate cost, cheaper than what you would get at a pharmacy, and they can register you for the products you need, and then you ring up that company, or your carer can ring up the company, pay for it over the phone using a credit card, and then they deliver to your door. So you need to be in touch with the dietitian to actually help facilitate that. Yeah.